All right, here we go with part 2 of the critique for the best shot for the Summer 143 class. Let's leap right into it. We have 11 more to go. I've been taking a little more time on these first ones than we might normally do, but I want to start really getting you guys into some good editing techniques, so it seems worth taking the time to do. So anyway, here we go. We'll leap right into this. Okay, well, here's the entrance to Imperial Beach. The shot is one of the kind that would make a nice shot if you're doing a book on the region or on Imperial Beach itself. It's a type of thing that sometimes I'll refer to as a, quote, I was there, unquote, shot. It's probably not an image that you would simply put on the wall or hang on the wall, but of its type, it's okay. There are a couple of issues with it from a technical standpoint. Number one, you've lost the color on this one shape, which I assume is meant to replicate the nose of a surfboard. There's some fog out there. You've got to be careful of lights that are blinding you in it. You've got someone standing here. It's hard to tell what he's doing behind that tree or by that tree. Maybe we should avoid all speculation. And there are a couple of areas that I have no idea what's going on, but they're kind of fascinating. Up in here, along the trees. Hard to tell. But by and large, this is really a shot that just is to introduce Imperial Beach, and there's not much I could do to work on this one or improve it, except maybe go back and reshoot it and decide how exactly do I want to introduce this place, and why am I letting all of this bright, shiny stuff take my eye away from the important part, which is this sign right here. So let's go to another one. Well, we started with a sign that had a lot of surfing shapes in it, and here we have another surfing shape. This is a really interesting reflection shot of the surfer and his board. I assume it's actually upside down, unless the water is on the ceiling and this foot here is nailed to it. But apart from that, it's a really fascinating concept. I think you did a good job of it. The only thing I would suggest was, as you've got these little bits of foam here that are nice and crisp, these should have been too. So the depth of field could have been greater, and this would have been a more interesting shot, because these little fluffs of foam could become almost like bizarre little clouds in this Fantasyland sky. Concept is really good. I would go back and work with this concept a little and see what we could do to make it even better, even to the point of maybe shooting it so that you were getting some sunset colors down in here. Now that would be cool. So I'd work with this. I think you're off to a good start. Well, here we have a nice backyard shot. This is an interesting looking bench in a little garden area. But this kind of shot, if you didn't discover it trying to make this one, you certainly will. This is an incredibly difficult shot, trying to pull out things that are in the shade, in pretty hard shade, and at the same time pull out stuff that's in bright sun. Most sensors simply will not accommodate that in a single shot. In Camera Raw, there may be enough information if, big if here, if this area in here, the bright blown out area of your shot, is actually not going off the right edge of your histogram, you could probably pull detail out of it. Here in the compressed JPEG, there's not much left we can do for it. The ideal thing, if you must shoot like this, is to do one of two things. Either shoot with a graduated neutral density filter, which cuts the brightness back here, and this is probably going to take a 3-4 stop neutral density filter. Or you could do it as an HDR, which we'll talk about later in the class, or one more thing, an exposure blend. But as a single capture, there is simply too much of a range between this brilliant sunlight on the building and the deep shadow where this bench is. If you had captured it all, then I would be asking you, what is it specifically this shot is about? Because you've got the bench front and center, that would sort of imply it was the subject. But in terms of real estate and brightness and texture and visual interest, 3/4 of this picture is something else. So if you're going to make something your primary subject, you need to start worrying about how to isolate that using the tools that we're learning now with motion, with depth of field, and with issues of editing in order to make it clear what really is the shot. I would propose that it is the bench and we don't need all this other stuff. And then it would be a lot easier to edit, except for this blown out area here. Okay, let's go on. Well, here we have a shot we can work on. It's a pretty little garden shot. I think it's nicely done. The only issues I would have is we've got a little bit of overexposure in what is, I think, the primary shot. Where is the shot? It's right in here. It's this cute little plant and the yellow flowers that are growing out of it. The rest of it are just support troops. They are there to provide environment, to provide a little color, to do what we need to really help us look at the primary object. So the first thing I would do in this one, because I think it's possible to reclaim this, is I would crop it to where we've got the primary object is our inescapable subject. These other flowers, they're not sharp enough to where we're really paying attention to them. We don't care what they are. We really care mostly about the color. So I would turn this more into a vertical around the primary subject. Maybe like that. And then let's see what we can do to maybe add a little detail in there. I think overall we could drop the exposure on this a little. One way to be very cautious about doing it is to come up and use image adjustments exposure. This approach can really destroy color. But let's see if we can get something out of it. Notice how it grays out? It doesn't get just darker. It gets dimmer. Then we could try to bring the gamma up or down. I mean, there's a lot of things we could try to do to this. This is really not a preferred way to do it. So I'm going to cancel out of that. The easy way to do it is to come over here and do something we've already done a number of times. And that's use our multiply layer. You notice even though it's darker, it's not flatter. So now we can come in with the opacity. Bring that back to about halfway. Look on the opacity scale. We haven't darkened it much, but it's been enough to help bring some of this in. So suppose we wanted to work with that concept a little more. Okay, let's take it all, and now we'll do a layer mask. And since we've used a normal layer mask, we'll take a black brush over here and we'll come in and lighten these areas. And now we've got a bit more interest in it. There's our original. It's a little blown out. By using the layer mask to create our vignettes, we've created this more dynamic and in some ways richer shot, and we've pulled in some detail in this flower head. This is a fun shot. I'm not sure what to say about it, since you have moved right away from any personal point of reference I might have to make a comment. The only thing I would do with this, obviously our shot is right here where the action is. It's in her face, responding to whatever is going on. The only thing I would do is emphasize that by taking the background down in the way that we've been doing it all along. We'll make our duplicate layer. We'll make it a multiply layer. Oh yeah, it's going to work fine. And what we'll do is use a layer mask. It's already set up for that from the last one. Now, I want you to look at something as I'm working away. I've only got a 40% opacity on this brush, so it's not doing a whole lot. Look at this icon. You see how some of it's darker than other parts, some of it's gray? If it were black, it would be 100% effect. Gray is less than that. The lighter the gray, the lighter the effect. So if you look over here, you really get a sense of how you're doing. So if I want to try to bring back more of this, I can do that simply by adding some to it. So let's see. There was our original. Now we've got a little more effect on it. Would it help if we emphasize that? I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, maybe. Maybe. Let's take this one and cut it back just a little. Now we have a much more dramatic shot. We've got better tone in the skin of both of the ladies. I think this is a much stronger shot than was that. So there's our original. There's one layer. There's two layers. Sometimes it's so simple to bring these up to being a much better shot. Wow. Now here we have, right out of a James Taylor song, I've seen fire and rain. So here we have a fiery sky. Only one time have I ever seen a sky like this. I was out in the desert, out in Anza Borrego. The sky was precisely this color, and it turned some freshly baked, very shiny mud into a reflection of that color. It was surreal. I took a straight shot, and people have accused me to this day of photoshopping that picture, but it's actually was shot on film, and it's pretty straight. This is an exciting shot. I don't know how much you've manipulated it to get here, but it's a pretty nice shot. The only thing I would do, and this is going to be tedious, I'm going to show you how in a couple of areas, but it is tedious. All of these little fine power lines are really in the way. God, they're distracting. So what I would do, I'm going to zoom in on it so we can see it a little better, is use a trick we used on one shot early on. I'll come over here and pick up the spot healing brush. And then take and just bring it along this line, and it goes away. Now the problem is there is no recovery from this if you screw up like that. So what I would do at this point is I would make a duplicate layer. And I'm going to work on this top layer. If I make a mistake, and let's say, for example, I come into that tree and I mess up that tree. Now, because below it I have that, I can use a layer mask or simply an eraser tool and erase through to the good part, and then go on with what I'm doing. This is going to be very tedious to make all of this work. But ultimately you can do it. And when you do get rid of this, you can start to see already that the image is getting cleaner. You're really now looking at the sunset. When you get in very tight to these, sometimes the spot healing brush will do it, sometimes it won't. In which case, then what you've got to do is come in and clone this out. And how would you can see I'm having trouble getting that out. How would you do it? Well, I would zoom in on it, come and pick up the clone stamp tool, which is this one. And now here's how this works. When you hold down the Alt or Option key, you can see how this cursor changes to a little crosshair type thing. To use the clone stamp tool, we use it in two phases. Step one is to pick up the information that you want to apply over the existing information. So if I hold down the Alt or Option key, you can see the cursor change into this kind of crosshair thing. I like this plain tone, so I'm going to hold down the Option key or the Alt key, click there, let go, and now I've loaded that position. When I come down here, I can click over it. Now when I'm holding it, do you see the little crosshairs that are above it where I initially picked it up? Though by default will move with the brush. So if I want to pick up a graduated surface, then I'm going to hold down the Alt key, grab it, I just clicked on it, bring it over, and now as I come down, I'm picking up the material to the side so I can make it all match whatever is off to the other side. And with that, I can get in on my little detail. Then I could go back to the healing brush, spot healing brush, to pick up that. So once we get rid of all of that offending wires, as tedious as it is, it will really help improve this shot. But it's pretty dramatic. There's no way around that. Nicely done. Well, this has an interesting possibility to it. The water flowing through all of this eroded rock, showing the polish of the rock. This could be really cool because this is almost like skin. It reads almost like human skin. The problem is there are a lot of different shots in here, all in the same picture. So there's a shot in here. This is kind of cool. There's a shot here with all of this. There's a graphic shot over here. There's a shot with the comparison of this linear item to this soft textural thing. So I think your eye was drawn to the fact that you're seeing a number of compositions here. The problem is you took them all. And for the photograph, we've really got to get in and take one or the other. Okay, so I'd grab the camera and go back here and start looking. And now zoom in. Look for individual graphic compositions in this area. You'll find them. They're all there. So it's a good concept, a good target area. It just needs to be worked a little tighter. Well, here's the ultimate sledding hill. If we got snow here, let's say we got about 6 inches of snow on this hill. Wow. If you got going hard enough, you could almost do a launch out to Hawaii off of the bottom of this hill. It would be pretty exciting. You would, though, want to stop before you got to the bottom. But what a hill this would make. I've always looked at the hills around here and thought, man, if we got a few inches of snow, it could be really exciting here. So it's a nice shot down a street. Again, it's like the shot of Imperial Beach. This is a nice image showing a special place. This is like the Lombard Street shots in San Francisco. None of them are very exciting as a standalone photo, but the street is exciting, and so having a photo in it in something that's talking about that area is important. What I would do is crop a little of this off. This is blown out here, and I know that's natural. This is just during some fog or a marine layer out there, but I'd get rid of it and just let us see this street going off into the blue ocean. I did have to chuckle at this one when it came in. Let's see if we can deal with this reasonably. The text said that this was to show the difference between an injured foot and a normal one. The problem is the way this pillow is laid across your leg. It does at first make it look like either there's a notch taken out of your ankle, or by comparison, this ankle is really swollen. And so consequently, I have no idea which is the injured one and which isn't. We either need an arrow to it or a bandage or something. But it's fascinating. This little notch up here I would get rid of. Either clone these covers up to cover that area or crop it down, which would probably be the easiest thing. But it's an interesting shot. You know, when I first saw this, I thought these were giant pumpkins out here for some kind of Oktoberfest display. This is an interesting layout. This particular image illustrates a fascinating optical illusion that sometimes can be a pain in your photos and make it very difficult to render well. Just looking at this, because of the way this area slopes around, it's because it curves around, it actually does slope this way, it makes the photo look like it's off kilter. But I don't think it is. The thing that should be horizontal is the top of this building. And I believe that it is horizontal. It's fine. And that means, so are those shadows. That means that this picture is square. But it doesn't look like it. So sometimes we have an issue of where you've got to change things. And part of it is that these trees, must be a wide angle lens, are not straight. They get straighter as you get towards the center of the shot. That's typical of a wide angle distortion. But it's not straight here. So I'm going to show you how to solve that. And I'll use the guideline as my indicator. First of all, we're going to do a select all. And what that does, you can see the marching ants around the entire image. It has selected everything. And then we'll come over here to Edit, Transform, Skew. We're going to want to play with this. Now, some people want to go to the perspective setting, which would work if everything on both sides of the center line of this picture were off by the same amount, but they're not. So we're going to use skew. Now, that made all of these little handles appear. All we have to do now is grab this one and pull it out to where now we've got these critical lines looking straight up and down. And now we hit enter. We'll take it. We'll go to deselect or control or command D. We'll get rid of the guidelines. And now our picture looks straight. It was straight before, but it had the distortion from probably a wide-angle lens or just the angle that you were shooting it at. But the first thing to do is check something like this. That really is level. It doesn't look like it, but it is. So check it and then straighten the things that aren't. Could use a little more detail in here, and this could be more of a panorama now that we've got that straightened out. So even if it were like that, now we've got a little better composition in it. And truthfully, I would get rid of just that little tree that's hanging out there. It's kind of a distraction. So is this one, maybe. Pay attention to the edges of your shot. You've got little items in there. They really can be a distraction. Just enough to diminish the power of your composition. This is our last one. Well, this is a nice area. This, too, has an area that looks out of plumb that probably isn't. It's the angle of the camera, but this wall on your shot really ought to be level, and it's not. And we've also got lines along the buildings that are not square. This is so easy to fix in the camera, but it's not that hard to fix here, so we'll do it again. We'll go to select all, edit, transform, skew. The first thing we'll do is straighten it this way. And then we'll straighten it this way. Pull this side down a little. We'll pull this over just a touch. Hit enter. Deselect. Get rid of the guidelines. And now we've got a shot that doesn't feel like our buildings are about to fall over quite so much. But again, a simple solution if in fact you were doing it on the spot. Now I want to show you one more trick. And this one is a pretty good one to do that with. This would have been a cool shot to do with a polarizing filter to bring the sky out. Well, we can do that here. First thing I'm going to do is make a duplicate layer, just so I'm a little safe here. And now I'm going to create a little bit of false color to help with this enhancement. So I'm going to come into Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation. And I want blue only. And I want to add saturation to blue into that sky. And maybe just a little cyan while I'm at it. No, it doesn't have much effect. Okay. So now I've got the blue in the sky brought out. Well, that by itself is an improvement, but I'd like to see it a little darker, a little more dramatic. So now I'm going to duplicate this layer. and I'm going to make it luminosity. What luminosity does as a layer style is it imposes the tones of the top layer onto the bottom layer. And I want to adjust the blue tone based on the color. Okay, how do I do that? Well, it's actually pretty simple. I'm going to take and make this top layer, first of all, I'm going to make it a black and white layer. Now, if you look over here at the icons, this is actually black and white. But why is it color? Because I'm seeing the layer under it as it's being affected by this luminosity layer. So now I want to take this blue and make it a little darker. That's a little too dramatic. And we'll say okay. Now, we have solved one problem and created another. And the problem we've created, and this is typical, this happens when things are over sharpened, it happens with masks, it happens all the time. And it needs to be fixed, and it is so easy to fix. I'm not going to take the time to do it everywhere, but I'll show you how to do it up close. And here's a good example of it on the chimneys and on the roofs. This is so much easier to do if you do it on the original high-resolution TIFF or Photoshop file. Doing it on a compressed JPEG like this is tough because you've got so much compression artifact. But the approach is the same. We want to get rid of this over here. So the first thing I'm going to do is pick up the color, use the eyedropper, and I want to pick up the color that should be in there. Now I can do this with the paint brush, or if I've got colors that are changing, I can do it with the clone tool. In fact, let's do that. We'll use the clone stamp. Now what I want to do with that brush, all of the brushes have exactly the same style capability as our layers did. So, first thing I'm going to do is, number one, get rid of all these layers. I'm going to flatten this out. Now I'm going to tell this brush to do something specific. I need to get rid of a light halo, so I need the brush to darken. Remember from one that we did before, when it says darken, it will only darken. It will only paint whatever it is. If it's a normal brush, whatever color it is. If it's a clone stamp tool, whatever it has picked up based on its point of origin, and will only paint that over an area that is lighter than its own color, and not over one that is darker. So that's going to make it really easy here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit tighter so you can really see it work. And it's also easier when it's up tight. When it's up close, I guess I should say. So I'm going to come in here and make my brush a little smaller. Yeah, that's pretty good, about 97%. Now I'm going to pick it up here with the Alt key. You can see the cursor change to that crosshairs. And now you can see it did not paint on that darker area. Because that darker area was darker than the color you just picked up. So you could go through and fix this whole area just like that. And it would be really pretty simple. Might be a little tedious at times, but it's not difficult. Okay, I think that's it for this. We went through the second half fairly quickly. And we'll take a breather, and then tomorrow I'll start working on the other assignments that have been turned in, so we can have you look at those and see what we can do with them. Meantime, when you're working on your other assignments, use these techniques. That's why we're covering them. This is one of the more important parts of the whole class, your ability to use these editing techniques. After all, it's digital, so let's use it like digital. I'll see you next time. Take care.